Today we export close to about 30 to 35 billion worth of medicines.
I've heard you say earlier that India's share of FDA plants is very high.
In terms of tablets and capsules, our volume would be anywhere in upwards of 60 to 70%. Earlier, we've never had companies who were able to get a new molecule to the market.
What kind of innovation do you see?
The larger PLI schemes, or where the large part of a benefit is going to come along, are in the phase of expansion. If India is going to grow, certainly this segment is going to grow faster.
Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of Fundamentals. This is Shaily Gang, Head Products at Tata Mutual Fund. I'm delighted to speak to Ms. Meeta Shetty, Fund Manager of Tata India Pharma and Healthcare Fund. Being nimble and agile is the highlight of this fund manager. She is someone who does not shy away from taking aggressive stock positions, and being true to the sector is a quality which she showcases, not done by many sector fund managers. Hi Meeta, very glad to be talking to you today.
Hi Shaily, I'm glad to be on this platform and talk to the investors of Fundamentals.
Thank you for being here. So to start with, in the last 20 years, when we think about the pharma industry, the industry has grown in size, the profits have grown, the cash flows have grown. And how has this journey been? And along the way, have we created a moat for ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely, Shaily. So if I look at the last 20 years, and particularly the time frame from 2010 to 15, way back that time, 2010 was the starting era of Indian companies going aggressively to tap the US market, and we started building our exports very aggressively as a country, and we started showcasing our capability of producing the drugs at a desired quality and at an extremely attractive price. And I think that that's what really has made us create our own stand today in where we are in terms of our overall pharma industry. So today we export close to about 30 to 35 billion worth of billion worth of medicines, and a large part of that goes to the US. So clearly, I mean, over the last 15-20 years, we've really built a very good scale. So I would say that not only the export, but even if I look at the domestic market, the kind of medicines, the kind of products that we've been able to launch, the kind of depth that we have been able to create in terms of reach, etc. Because there was a time when these medicines were not available in the inferior part of the country, which has also got built over a period of time. And now there is a lot of access to healthcare and the pharma medicines, etc. In the interiors of the country. So I think that on both hand, whether it be the export or the domestic market, I think things have really been extremely good. We've also gone through cycles here. So as I said, 2010 to 15 were the years where we actually built our US business extremely well and we showcased our strengths. The following 5 years were also the challenging period, because in the first 5 years, if there was an accumulation of wealth in terms of cash building, in terms of balance sheet getting strengthening, the following 5 years also saw a bit of derailment of those, particularly led by extremely high competition in the export market and most importantly in the US market. So we've gone through cycles, yes, but I think net when I look at the last at least 15 years, 2010 to now, it's been, the journey has been pretty interesting for the pharmaceutical stocks, at least I would say.
Great. In fact, I've heard you say earlier that India's share of FDA plants is very high, and a number that I read somewhere recently was about 28%. What has been our edge there? 28% is a high number.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have close to about 650, 700 odd FDA approved plants in India, and that would be roughly about 30 odd % of the global FDA approved plants. So clearly we have an edge there, and it has got built over time, right? That edge came in because, as I said, that once we started supplying to the US, the kind of quality and at the cost that we were providing, we certainly started taking more and more market shares. Today, in fact, value-wise, we would not be more than 20% of the US generic market. But if you look at the volume-wise, it's actually amazing to see that in terms of tablets and capsules, our volume would be anywhere in upwards of 60 to 70%. So higher volume share. Even if you look at the ANDA filings, right? The companies are supposed to file for an ANDA, and then that approval happens over a period of maybe 2 years, 3 years, sometimes even longer. But during that cycle, companies also alongside or parallelly start building capability. So if you look at the ANDA share in terms of what filing happens and how many Indian companies participate, we are close to about 40 to 45%. So clearly, I mean, given our volume share, our regular ANDA filing share, we will have to have a back end which has to be equally strong, and which is why that 30% odd share in terms of the FDA facilities.
Some great data points and insights there. Thanks. Moving on to the fund, we read about generics, we read about branded pharma products. We have companies which are domestic, export oriented. We have both. We also hear about API companies, and I think API companies were the first lot in the journey of pharma companies. And now, of late, we've been hearing about the CDMO space. How is the fund positioned across all of these subsegments, if you can give your perspective?
Sure. So CDMO is of course there about 10 odd percentage of the fund, and it's largely in that range for some time now. Whereas and I would club API as well there, because API is nothing but you're manufacturing for an end customer. So when you say CDMO, we are talking about contract drug manufacturing organization. That's what CDMO stands for. And an API company is either manufacturing for an export market or a domestic market. So I would club that into CDMO. Then you're left with the pharma and the healthcare space. Interestingly, if you look at this fund has gone through various cycles in terms of how I have positioned the pharma versus healthcare, depending on the valuations, depending on the visibility on growth, etc. So there was a time when we were owning close to about 30 to 35% of pharma in our fund, and we had then got it down to about 10 to 12% range. By about 2021-22, we've kind of moved that money into pharma names, and the healthcare proportion was lower. Recently, we've gone back to that 30% on the healthcare names. So right now, if you directly answering your question, we would be at about 30% weight right now on the healthcare side, and pharma would be about 60 odd percent, and 10, as I said, is the CDMO space.
Great. So has PLI been an enabler, overall, and how has it benefited exactly?
So I think that it's an extremely good step in the right direction, certainly. But it's announced, and quite a few companies have actually also, are working on that scheme and are already enrolled for it. Right now, most of the large ones, actually, the larger PLI schemes, or where the large part of, a benefit is going to come along, are in the phase of expansion, the capability building, or the capacity building, rather, I would say. And I think that we would start seeing accrual of that into revenues, etc., in the next maybe a couple of quarters to start with.
So approval rate has probably improved. Great. That probably would also help the industry to, focus more on innovation. So what kind of innovation do you see, either have happened recently or kind of happening in the pharma space? Could be related to development of molecule, or, sourcing of molecule, or AI, usage of AI?
So I think that innovations, so in Indian context, earlier we've never had companies who were able to get a new molecule to the market, which we call NCE, new chemical entity. But of late we've had some of those, and which is extremely, it's extremely positive that a company sitting out of India is able to get a new drug to the molecule, which was always otherwise the European or the US companies who would be the innovator companies, and we would just be followers in terms of getting any newer medicine or any new addressable market, which was never addressed by any company, and we were able to address that ailment or disease. So I think we've seen those kind of instances happening in the recent past. But having said that, clearly there has been a lot of innovation, which I would not call it a breakthrough in its own way. But there are these gradual changes which we keep doing in terms of, if there is a capsule or a tablet, we work on getting in a new delivery system via ointment or a spray, which is easy to access, easy to take that dosage, and we keep doing these smaller tweaks here and there, and those innovations are consistent, and most of those innovations happen within Indian market and for the Indian patients or the population. But those kind of innovations are constantly there. But does higher compliance lead to this? I would say not really, because compliance will ensure that there is a steady, if your approval is there in the US for a certain molecule, there is a steady supply and there is no disturbance into that. Whereas innovation is clearly the R&D team's core focus, where you hire the right talent and are you able to get the molecule, a new molecule to the market?
True.
Because eventually that is what will give you a longer visibility to not only growth, to margins, but it also kind of gives you a very strong balance sheet, because the kind of profitability you generate when you get a new molecule to the market is far superior, and that kind of strengthens your balance sheet so strong that then you can spend more on newer these molecules and create a chain of these NCE molecules over a period. That's how the global US or the European giants have grown, right, over the period.
Great to have this texture on the pharma space. Moving on to healthcare or hospitals, you've been very kind of optimistic about that space, and it has emerged over the last, I think, 2 to 3 years. Your perspective on hospitals?
Sure. So, when we look at pharma, it's a mix of export and domestic story, whereas hospitals is more inward looking, more domestic only story. So it's very similar to a consumption-led story in some ways. I can, if I have to, still give it a name, because you are talking about, if you're talking about per capita income going up, people wanting to live better, live longer, then I think that healthcare becomes the core of that. You would want to get treated at a better facility, you would want to have better access to, the better technology in terms of your healing, etc. So clearly hospitals is a very India-centric story, and if India is going to grow, certainly this segment is going to grow faster. If you look at the fabric of the healthcare, or particularly the hospital industry in India, we would be having roughly about 20 to 22 lakhs kind of beds currently. And if I have to call out how much would be, say, government beds and how much would be the private, roughly you can say that half of that would be government and the remaining half should be private. But given our population where we are, this is still at a number of, say, 1.3 beds per 1,000 people, which is extremely low, because if you look at the global average, or at least the recommended average by WHO, we should be having at least 2 times more beds versus what we have. So I think that there is a lot of room for this sector to keep expanding for at least the coming few years, and as I said, I mean, the more better income generation, the better access to this healthcare will happen. So I think that this is one very, very structural story to look at when you're looking at this space. So I keep moving in and out depending on the valuation, but structurally when I look at 10 years or 20 years out, I think this is one sector to certainly keep in your mind.
Yeah. And what about diagnostics then, having spoken of hospitals? What are the drivers there, and growth prospects? Do you think that segment becoming quite big?
Yeah, absolutely. So diagnostics is clearly an area where I think that it becomes the kind of middle layer between hospitals and your regular doctors or GPs or specialists, and it's like a connect between these two, and COVID, led us become more aware of our health and regular checkups, etc. And wellness is emerging as an extremely strong area within the diagnostic piece. So I think that yes, it's becoming a more prominent area as far as our entire health journey is concerned. And one more interesting data point that I would like to share is that if you look at the diagnostic industries, roughly 40% of the industry would lie with the hospitals, because we realize that hospitals also have their own diagnostic centers within the hospitals, and it's a requirement, of course. So the second 40% would be with the single store, mom and pop kind of setups, which are individually run by
standalone,
MD paths, etc. So the remaining 20% is the only piece which is actually the chains, the regional chains or a pan-India chain or more organized diagnostic labs, if I were to call. So this ANOR to org shift is also not so prominent here as we would have seen in the other sectors, and which at some point I think will happen. So not only is the industry growing because of our more better awareness, etc., but there's also this shift which is probably going to happen over the next few years from an unorg to an organized format. So I think that there's interesting levers there when I'm looking at the diagnostic industry as well.
So having spoken about the pharma and healthcare pieces, keeping in mind the current valuations and the growth prospects, how would you want to summarize what you hold in your fund?
Right. So if I look at the valuation for the sector, and I'll give you an interesting data that if you look at Nifty Pharma versus Nifty, it's been a very interesting chart. I mean, if you look at 2015, which was kind of the peak of the best year of those pharma growth stories, the Nifty Pharma was trading at close to about 70 to 80% premium over Nifty. We've seen that collapse to just 0% in 2019. And right now, if you look at it, it's trading at about 50% premium. So I think that, given the growth prospects and given the both on healthcare and on pharma, it's really, I would not say that it's very cheap, but I think that it's still not very, very expensive. So that's what that's how I'm thinking about it. And the reason for moving from pharma to healthcare, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, is because that's where I'm seeing more value. And one thing also is interesting to note that healthcare in the overall index, or BSE healthcare index, if I were to call out, is also growing in terms of its contribution, right? About 10 or 12 years back, it would be just about less than 5%. Today we are almost 20%. So that is also becoming important, and plus currently the valuations are more attractive versus the pharma space, at least when I'm looking at the entire sector. So that's how we are balancing it out. But yes, I would say that we are not very cheap, but we are not very, very expensive as well as we have been in terms of earlier years, like 2015, as I said.
Great. I think great to know the details and the texture on the space and the fund. Happy investing in the Tata India Pharma and Healthcare Fund. This is one fund where you will find, positions being taken depending upon the valuations and the structural growth story across pharma and healthcare as subsegments. And even within pharma, you would see the fund manager, allocating across domestic, export-oriented APIs and CDMO space, as well as the healthcare space looked at from the lens of, the diagnostics piece growing, as well the hospital's average revenue per bed growing. So this is a great space to be in on the pharma and healthcare side. Thank you, everyone.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.